At our engagement party, my fiancé said, "My ex is my true love. I'm just settling for you." I didn't say anything. I went all out the next morning. Hey, Reddit. At our engagement celebration, my fiancé embarrassed me. She asked her ex to come and told everyone that I was basically her backup. I just smiled. The next day, I made some calls that ruined their jobs. My name is Elias. I'm 33 years old, and I'm a man. I manage a business that is arguably the most boring one that pays well. I help businesses look into their competition. Think of a private eye, a spreadsheet whiz, and a human search engine all in one. I get paid a lot of money by big firms to look through government documents and financial reports to see what their competitors are really doing. Enzo, my best friend, loves to joke that I'm basically a professional dirt finder. He had been my friend since college. He is a lawyer who helps people buy companies. He finds the issues with the law. I find the problems with money. We've killed more disastrous business transactions than you can count. Enzo was also the one who told me to be careful of Andrea from the start. He was right, but I didn't listen to him since I was thinking with the wrong mind. Andrea was everything I wanted. Beautiful, friendly, and connected. She owned what she termed an influencer marketing organization, which was really just 3 part-time workers and an Instagram account with a lot of fake followers. From the beginning, there were indicators that something was wrong. Her business didn't make much money, but she liked luxury things. We let her use our spare bedroom for her agency, but she acted like she was the next big thing in advertising. "We're changing how marketing works," she would add with a straight face, usually while placing a $300 lunch on her business credit card. But the biggest red sign was Jared, her ex-boyfriend, who somehow made it to every social function. He owned a tiny investing company. The guy was the opposite of me. Tall, typically handsome, sure of himself because he comes from old money, and clearly still very much on Andrea's mind. He'd show up at gatherings like a terrible rash, make jokes with Andrea, and treat me like I was the hired help. Enzo really despised that guy. Enzo told me that Jared was slimier than a used car salesman after he crashed Andrea's birthday dinner without being asked. He also said that he had checked into Jared's investing firm out of curiosity. It turns out Jared had 2 bankruptcies in the last 10 years and a record with the government that read like a horror novel. I should have paid more attention to Enzo's studies, but I was too busy organizing my wedding. I get the irony. This is what I didn't know. Andrea had set up automatic transfers from our shared checking account to her business account. Every month, when her agency couldn't pay its costs, money would automatically migrate from our personal accounts to pay for her company expenses. I found out about this 3 weeks before our engagement party when I was looking at our bank statements to apply for a mortgage. It all made sense until strange transactions of $2,000 to $3,000 started happening. I called Andrea from my home office. "Can you come over here for a minute?" She came in wearing yoga pants and a big sweater. "Hey babe." I turned my laptop so that it was facing her. "Can you tell me more about these automatic payments to your business account?" Her face went from, "I'm ready for Instagram," to, "Oh crap, I've been caught," in less than 2 seconds. That's basically extra money for cash flow needs. Things that affect financial flow that have shifted $18,000 from our personal account in 6 months. It's only for a short time. The agency is about to get this big client, a supplement company that may expand a lot. I looked at her. $18,000, Andrea. That's more than some individuals make in 6 months. But it's a good investment in our future. We'll be fine financially once the agency gets going. I wanted to know how an Instagram marketing company with 3 part-time workers was going to make that much money, but I was trying to be helpful. A big mistake. When I told Enzo about it over coffee, he pondered about it. He said that she had been surreptitiously using my money to pay for her false business while I paid for everything else, and she thought this was a good way to invest in our future. He took out his phone and looked up the company when I remarked that maybe the supplement arrangement might work out. He handed me an FDA warning letter from 6 months ago in less than 30 seconds. They were lying about health benefits and breaching federal rules about advertising. The FDA has a public list of warning letters. If you know where to look, it only takes around 10 seconds to find it. So, Andrea's biggest client was a corporation that was abusing federal marketing rules and was definitely ready to be sued into the ground. That's when I started to ponder what other public records would be worth looking into. It's just out of curiosity. But before I could find out more, Andrea decided to organize a party to announce her engagement, which changed everything. She thought of the celebration. "We need to say something," she said. She rented a rooftop space in downtown LA, hired a photographer, bought food for 50 guests, and sent out invitations that looked like they were for a Fortune 500 meeting. Her trust fund pals, social media acquaintances, and relatives were on the guest list, as well as my business contacts, who probably assumed they were going to a networking event. Enzo was there for me in case I needed him. He added, "This feels like a show," as we walked into the venue and fixed his tie. "It seems like she's trying to convince everyone, even herself, that she's delighted to marry you. You're being paranoid. I'm paying attention. There is a distinction." The place was lovely. I'll give her that. She looked great and worked the audience like she was running for office. She told her pals that I was her fiancé, the business consultant. But Jared's arrival should have been my first sign. He got there fashionably late, hugged Andrea for too long, and made himself at home like he was co-hosting the party. Enzo mumbled something about how strange it was that the ex-boyfriend was invited. When I informed him that Andrea stated they were just friends now, he remarked, "Sure, and I'm just a lawyer who sometimes practices law." Then came the speech that ruined everything. Andrea took the microphone and asked everyone to pay attentively. Everyone turned to her and raised their glasses, and the talk stopped. She started by saying, "Thank you all for—" The room grew dead still. "Jared," she whispered, her eyes finding him across the room. "You will always be the one that got away. My one true love." I saw 50 people drop their jaws at the same time. The wife of my largest client gasped out loud. My business partner Jake looked like he wanted to crawl under a table. "Oh, heck no," Enzo said quietly next to me. "But sometimes," Andrea went on, "life isn't about passion. Sometimes it's about finding someone reliable, stable, and who will never break your heart, because they could never inspire that kind of intensity anyway." She held up her engagement ring like she was accepting an award. "So, I'm thrilled to announce my engagement to someone who will take very, very good care of me." The silence was deafening. Jared raised his glass with a smug grin that made me want to punch him. A couple of Andrea's girlfriends started that awkward pity clapping. Enzo looked at me with an expression that clearly said, "I told you so, but now isn't the time to say it." I didn't say anything, didn't flinch, and didn't make a commotion. I just took a slow sip of my drink, smiled a little, and started counting down in my head. How long does it take to research someone who just made the biggest mistake of her life? Jake caught my eye from across the room and raised his eyebrows in a question. I shook my head very slightly. Princess Andrea had just disrespected someone who gets paid to find problems hiding in public records. "Well," Enzo said quietly as he finished his drink, "this should be interesting. Game on." The party ended about as well as you'd expect. Half the guests left right after Andrea's speech, including 2 of my biggest clients. Enzo stayed until the end, just making sure I processed what actually happened, because that wasn't just disrespectful. That was public humiliation designed to put me in my place as the backup option. Andrea was completely clueless. She spent the ride home talking about how emotional and authentic her speech had been, and how everyone seemed really moved by her honesty. "Did you see Jared's face?" she said, fixing her lipstick in the passenger mirror. "I think he finally understands what he lost." I drove in silence, already mentally organizing the research project that was about to take over my life. That night, after she passed out, still wearing her engagement dress like some twisted Cinderella, I went into my home office and opened a new case file. Here's what people don't understand about my work. It's not about hacking or corporate spying or any of that movie nonsense. It's about being really, really good at finding and understanding publicly available information that most people don't know exists. Every business deal, every professional license, every court filing, every government complaint, it's all public record. You just need to know where to look and how to connect the dots. So, I started with basic business research on Andrea's company. Her influencer marketing agency was set up as an LLC in California, which meant I could look at her business filings through the state's website. The filings were immediately interesting. Her registered address was our condo. Fine. Lots of small businesses use home addresses. But her business license showed 3 employees, while her workers' compensation filings showed 0 coverage. Either she was lying about her business size or she wasn't properly protecting her workers. More interesting was her business banking setup. Her LLC account was connected to our joint checking account as backup funding, which explained the mysterious transfers I'd found. But using personal money to cover business expenses creates tax problems that she probably hadn't thought about. I pulled her business credit report next. Since I was listed as a personal guarantor on several of her business accounts, I had legal access to this information. The report showed a pattern of late payments, maxed out credit lines, and a disturbing habit of using business credit for clearly personal expenses. I called Enzo the next morning asking for a favor. He immediately guessed I wanted him to research my ex-fiancée's business practices using his fancy legal database access. I want everything. Business filings, professional licenses, government compliance history, the works. What about Jared? Him too. If I'm going to research the ex-boyfriend, I might as well be thorough. Enzo's law firm had access to legal databases that made my research tools look like kids' toys. Within 24 hours, he'd put together a preliminary report that was absolutely beautiful. He called me from his office the next evening to tell me I was going to love this. Andrea's business was basically a house of cards built on quicksand. Her business license expired in 3 weeks and she hadn't filed for renewal. Her workers' comp insurance was canceled for non-payment 6 months ago. She'd been claiming employees on her tax forms, but not actually providing the required protections. Even better was the IRS situation. She'd been claiming personal expenses as business tax write-offs for 2 years. European vacation as market research, designer clothes as brand development, spa treatments as networking events. The IRS has computer programs that eventually flag this kind of pattern. And Jared. Enzo's voice got noticeably happier when he got to Jared. The guy was a goldmine of professional problems, 2 personal bankruptcies, multiple court judgments for unpaid debts, and a regulatory record that read like a textbook on what not to do as an investment advisor. He was required to tell his clients about his bankruptcy history and financial problems. But based on his client agreements, it looked like he'd been telling people he had a clean financial record, while his public filings showed the opposite. That's a career-ending compliance violation. But the crown jewel of Enzo's research was Andrea's family business. Hartwell Development had been playing fast and loose with environmental rules for years, EPA violations, safety citations, permit problems, all sitting in public databases waiting for someone to connect the dots. Serious enough that if the right agency started asking questions, the whole company could face federal criminal charges. I had enough information to understand exactly who I was dealing with. Now I just needed to decide how to present these findings to the right people. Well, I will have to make some calls. Thank you, Enzo. Anytime, you magnificent bastard. I love when you start thinking with the right head. Then the next morning, I started making calls. The beautiful thing about government agencies is that they actually want citizens to report violations. I had screenshots of Andrea's Instagram post promoting Vita Boost Plus products with claims like boosts immune system 300% and clinically proven to prevent illness claims that weren't backed up by any actual clinical studies. We'll need the business information for both the influencer and the supplement company. The rep said, I provided Andrea's business registration details, her Instagram handle, the vitamin company's information, and specific post dates. This will trigger an investigation. The rep warned. Both parties will be notified that complaints have been filed. I understand. Second call. Finn's tip line. Jared's disclosure violations were exactly the kind of thing they investigate. I'd like to report concerns about a registered investment advisor's client disclosure practices. I gave them Jared's registration information and the case numbers for his bankruptcy filings and court judgments. We'll start an examination of his disclosure practices. The rep said, this type of violation typically results in client notification requirements. Third call, California Secretary of State Business Compliance Division. I'm calling to report a business that appears to be operating without proper licensing and worker protections. They're claiming employees but not carrying required workers' compensation insurance. Fourth call. IRS business tax tip line. I have information about a business that appears to be claiming personal expenses as business tax write-offs on federal tax returns. We'll start a correspondence audit. The rep said the business will need to provide documentation justifying claim deductions. All of these reports were completely legitimate. I wasn't making up problems. I was simply reporting existing violations to appropriate authorities using publicly available information. But the most important call was to Madison, Andrea's younger sister. Madison was everything Andrea wasn't. Actually employed, professionally competent, and completely exhausted by her sister's nonsense. She worked as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, actually earned her salary, and had been watching Andrea's business train wreck for months. I invited her for coffee. I want to make sure I'm being supportive of Andrea's family relationships, I told her. But I'm worried about some of the stress she's been under lately. Madison laughed. You mean the stress of pretending her business is successful while losing money every month? Is it that obvious, Elias? She's been asking Dad for money constantly while telling everyone her agency is crushing it. Last month, she needed $3,000 for expansion opportunities that turned out to be a European vacation. She spent the next hour venting about Andrea's relationship with reality. The fake employee count, the fraudulent business expenses, the constant family drama about money. But the real problem is Dad's company, Madison said, lowering her voice. It has been cutting corners for years. Environmental shortcuts, permit violations, safety issues. Dad thinks he's being smart, but he's building up massive regulatory liability. Andrea doesn't know. Andrea doesn't pay attention to anything that isn't about her. She has no idea the family business is basically a federal investigation waiting to happen. Perfect. Madison was providing me a full picture of the rules that Andrea's business and her family's business were breaking without meaning to. Madison went on, I love my sister, but she's been living in a fantasy world where things don't matter to her. That night, I called Enzo to let him know how things had gone that day. He told me to get it right. I told 4 distinct government entities about real violations, all based on information that was available to the public and real worries about compliance. Yes. And Andrea's sister effectively said that the family business was a time bomb for the government. She didn't mean to, but Enzo did like that. The regulatory process was already in motion within a week. 3 weeks after I wrote my report, Jared started having what his remaining clients would kindly term professional problems. The inquiry by FINRA was going just as planned, slowly, carefully, and very publicly in the industry. When FINRA looks into an investment advisor, they let the advisor's clients know and ask for proof of all important disclosures. Jared's clients began receiving official letters that essentially said, your investment advisor is being looked into for possible disclosure violations. Please send us proof of what you were told about his financial history. This was a big problem for the guy right away because he had been telling clients that he had a clean financial record, but his public bankruptcy filings told a very different story. Enzo was keeping an eye on things through his legal sector contacts and told us at our weekly lunch that Jared was very much out of luck. After getting such letters, 3 of his biggest clients had already filed formal complaints with FIN. People are upset that you didn't tell them vital things. It seems that he had been acting like he was financially stable. While I ate my salad, I watched the show. We were discussing about managing $8 million worth of customer assets. It's not a lot by industry standards, but it's enough for Jared to live in Manhattan Beach and drive a Porsche. Jared's reaction to the probe was sheer terror, which is exactly what I wanted to happen. He called Andrea too for emotional support. I knew this because she started appearing agitated and distracted, checking her phone all the time and inventing reasons to leave the house for errands that took a long time. She couldn't keep a secret to save her life. Within days, she was dropping hints about Jared's economic issues and how unjust it was that bureaucrats were going after wealthy people. It's just regulatory harassment, she muttered one night at supper, anxiously picking at her food. Jared is great at what he does. What kind of regulatory problems? I said without knowing. Something regarding what clients say. It seems like he has to tell them about past financial troubles that have nothing to do with his current skills. I nodded. There are a lot of rules for financial services. There are rules about what information must be made public to safeguard investors. But that's all in the past. He went bankrupt years ago. Bankruptcies? I spoke it like I had never heard it before. More than one bankruptcy? She knew she'd talked too much. He only had money problems when he was younger. I opened Jared's FIN records on my laptop that night and presented them to Andrea. I stated as I looked through the court document, she came home after another errand that smelled like expensive coffee and despair. She said he only needed some money to get through until this regulatory issue was fixed. He was losing clients due of the probe, which was hurting his business. But once everything was sorted out, they would come back. I looked at her and said that he was being looked into for lying to clients about his bankruptcies. Those clients weren't going to come back. She said it wasn't lying, just not giving out information that wasn't needed. She indicated that the bridge cash we were talking about was only $50,000 to cover costs until his license was reinstated. I almost choked on my coffee. $50,000 to pay for the operational costs of an investment advisor who has been suspended. It's a way to make money. He'll pay it back with interest once he's back in business. Andrea, he may be charged with a crime for breaking securities laws. I could tell from her eyes that she had already made up her mind to aid him, even though his license would never be reinstated. She was just trying to figure out how to get the money without me being involved. That's when I knew this was going to turn into full-blown financial protection mode. It's time to talk to Enzo. When I contacted Enzo that night, he couldn't believe it. She intended to pay her ex-boyfriend $50,000. She believed it would help them build a better future together. Enzo said she was engaged to me, and I told him that was true, but that she had been preparing her escape since the engagement party. Enzo told me to secure my money right away if she could go to my joint accounts and pay for Jared's legal defense. I could lose everything I worked for. He said to write down everything, talk to a lawyer about how to preserve your assets, and get ready for the fact that this relationship was finished. I informed him I was already there. She made her move that weekend. I was reading over client papers in my home office when she came to the door dressed like she was heading to a business meeting. She said, "I need to talk to you about something important." Of course. What's going on? I didn't think Jared's situation was this bad. He is going to have to pay a lot of money for his lawyer, and he is going to go broke. That's too bad. I want to help him. How? She took a big breath. I want to lend him $50,000 from our savings. I sat back in my chair and looked at her face. From the money we set aside for our wedding? It's only for a short time. Once this is all over, he'll pay it back. Andrea, the federal government is looking into him for securities fraud. His clients are suing him, his license is suspended, and his assets may be frozen. What makes you think he can pay back $50,000? I believe in him. And there it was. No, I said simply. What? No. I'm not paying for your ex-boyfriend's lawyer. Her face turned red with rage. It's not a legal way to defend yourself. It's money to help you get through a brief setback. It's $50,000 for a man who is facing criminal charges and has a reputation of being bad with money. Also, your ex is not my problem. Oh my God. Come on. Stop being silly. Jared is not bad with money. I looked up his bankruptcy papers on my laptop. She looked over the papers and lost some of her confidence. You can lend Jared your own money, Andrea, but I'm not giving him any. My own cash. We both realized she didn't have $50,000 of her own money. Her business was losing money. She didn't have any money saved up for herself, and her family's money was tied up in a business that was being looked at for environmental issues. Fine, she answered in a chilly voice. I'll think of something else. Good luck with that. I called Enzo right after she left. He stated it was time to preserve my assets in case of an emergency and ordered me to meet him at his office the next morning. We were going to make sure that my money stayed mine. That night, Andrea spent hours on her laptop, possibly looking for company loans, personal credit alternatives, and other ways to help Jared get out of his money problems. From across the living room, I observed her. This woman I wanted to marry was trying hard to figure out how to give another man $50,000 of our money. Enzo was correct. This connection was already done. I just had to handle the breakup like a pro. It's time to deal with Andrea like a business issue. By the 4th week, Andrea had become a full-time amateur detective. It was like witnessing someone try to do brain surgery with a butter knife. Jared's full financial collapse was what made her research go up a notch. FINRA not only put his license on hold, but also froze his business funds while they looked into the matter. His remaining clients had taken their money, his office lease was in default, and he may be charged with securities fraud. Jared, in his wonderful wisdom, thought that I was to blame for his difficulties. "This is too easy," Andrea said one night as she walked around our living room. "Jared's business doesn't just fall apart right after our engagement party." "Random?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "There's nothing random about such things. But everything started going wrong right after you met him. Everything started going wrong when his clients found out he'd been lying to them about his bankruptcy history. How do you know so much about FINR investigations?" I gestured to my computer screen because understanding regulatory processes is literally my job. This answer did not satisfy her. Her first move was to search my browser history looking for evidence that I'd been researching Jared. She found nothing because I use private browsing for all research activities. Basic operational security when you work with confidential business information. But instead of concluding that I had nothing to hide, she decided this was evidence of my criminal capabilities. "Why do you use private browsing?" "Because I research sensitive business information for clients who pay me for confidentiality," I said. "Or because you're hiding your illegal activities, right?" Enzo, who was over for dinner that night, nearly choked on his coffee. He asked, "What kind of illegal activities? Are you looking into public records too much?" Andrea said she didn't know, but she knew I was involved in Jared's problems. Enzo explained with the patience of someone talking to a child that I helped companies research regulatory compliance issues. Jared was violating securities regulations, and this was like blaming a food safety inspector for a restaurant getting shut down for health code violations. Andrea replied that I wouldn't understand because I was his friend and probably in on it, too. Enzo looked at me with an expression that clearly said they could trace it to a personal laptop registered to Andrea Hartwell and asked if they should escalate this to law enforcement. I told them not yet. That evening, I confronted her with printouts of the security logs. "Any particular reason you tried to hack my email accounts yesterday?" Her face went white. "I wasn't hacking anything. 14 failed login attempts. The security system logs everything." I spread the documents across the kitchen table. Attempting to access someone else's email accounts without authorization is a federal crime. I just wanted to see if you had anything about Jared. I pulled up the FINR website on my laptop. "Here, Jared Nathaniel. Click on Disclosure Events." She read through his regulatory history in silence. "This is all public?" she asked quietly. "Completely." Her conspiracy theory was crumbling in real time, but she doubled down on paranoia. "You still could have contacted his clients, pointed them toward this information." "I could have, but I didn't need to." "But how did F know to investigate Jared?" "Because someone reported potential disclosure violations. Agencies rely on public tips to identify problems." "Who reported him?" I met her eyes directly. "Could have been anyone." She stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to decide whether I was confessing or just explaining regulatory procedures. "By the way, Jared's looking at potential criminal charges, civil penalties, and permanent industry prohibition." That's when the full reality of Jared's situation finally hit her. But instead of accepting this and moving on, she decided to escalate her investigation into what she was now calling my shadow operations. Time for phase 3 of her detective career. Andrea's transition from amateur cyber detective to physical surveillance specialist was like watching someone go from playing checkers badly to attempting advanced chess while blindfolded. Her first move was following me to work. It was like being stalked by a golden retriever wearing sunglasses. Same silver BMW every time. Her personal car that she'd driven since college. Following 3 cars behind like she'd learned surveillance from a 1980s TV show. Wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. Enzo was with me the first time I spotted her. When he asked if we should be concerned, I said only if she was planning to surveillance me to death through secondhand embarrassment. He laughed and asked what the plan was. I suggested we give her a tour of exactly how boring my job actually was, the full treatment. What followed was what Enzo later called the world's most tedious surveillance tour of Los Angeles. I led Andrea on a journey through every aspect of my legitimate business operations, making sure she got a complete picture of exactly how mind-numbingly professional my work actually was. First stop, the law offices of Brennan, where I spent 2 hours reviewing public filings and regulatory documents for a client's merger research. She sat in the parking lot the entire time, probably wondering if I was planning corporate crimes or just really slow at whatever criminal masterminds do. Second stop, Morrison and Company CPAs, where I attended a seminar on new SEC disclosure requirements. Riveting stuff about quarterly reporting obligations and paperwork thresholds. She followed me there, too, parking across the street at a Starbucks. The parking attendant told me as I left the seminar that my girlfriend had been sitting at that Starbucks for 3 hours, had ordered 6 drinks, and kept taking pictures of my car. The third stop was my personal favorite, the downtown offices of Regulatory Compliance Solutions, where I was delivering a presentation about public records research to their executive team. By this point, Andrea had been following me for 4 hours of the most legitimate business meetings imaginable. I could practically see her questioning her own sanity as she watched me carry briefcases into office buildings and emerge an hour later with stamped receipts and business cards. But the best part was my final stop, the federal courthouse, where I needed to file routine compliance paperwork for a client's regulatory matter. Inside, I filed standard disclosure forms for a client's material event reporting, paid the filing fees, and got stamped receipts proving compliance with federal disclosure requirements. Through the lobby windows, I watched her sit in her car for about 15 minutes, clearly trying to figure out whether her criminal mastermind fiancé was being arrested, confessing to crimes, or meeting with government handlers. When I emerged an hour later with a briefcase full of properly filed federal documents, she was gone. Probably drove home to Google, what does it mean when someone files federal paperwork and how to tell if a fiancé is actually just really boring? That night, she approached me with her new notion. She was visibly upset that her day of surveillance had turned up nothing fascinating. I know you're not simply a business consultant, she said. Oh, really? What do you think I am? I don't know, but I followed you to 4 different attorney offices and a federal courthouse. Normal consultants don't spend all day in courtrooms. I took out my business registration, professional licenses, and client contracts and set them out on the kitchen table. Andrea, read my business license. Check out my professional qualifications. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, don't. I know you are the one who did all of this. That sounds hard. Stop it, Sherlock. I can't believe this. You're a real jerk. I let her go on for approximately 10 minutes. Deep down, I'm enjoying the performance. Then she made one last, desperate move. That night, she left the house in a rage and never came back. Fine. What I desired. I got a text 3 days later. I'm with Jared. This engagement is done. I said, okay, I'll have your things packed by the weekend. 2 weeks later, she came to get her things with Jared and a tow truck. It seems that he was her moral support. I saw them pack her things into Jared's BMW from my office window. For months later, when Jared's legal fees took all of his money, the car would be taken back. That afternoon, Enzo helped me change the locks. He wanted to know if I believed she would try to come back. I answered, not after what was going to happen to her family's business. By the way, Enzo stated that the EPA had called Hartwell Development last week and that a complete compliance audit was set for next month. Pretty. Was that my job? An anonymous tip with proof, all public records, well-researched, and professionally presented. 8 months after Andrea broke off our engagement, she came to my new house, ostensibly to talk about the mess I made of her life. My security, she stood in my living room, clearly having a hard time accepting what she had lost. Jared, my family's business, my business, everything. Her voice was trembling. You ruined everything. I was right. You planned everything. Then she lost it. You ruined my whole existence. How could you? No, I answered, my voice flat and chilly. You ruined your own life by breaking the law, lying about taxes, and lying about money. Now she was crying, and her mascara was pouring down her face. I love Jared. He was the only man I ever genuinely cared for. That's great, Andrea. You can now love each other without me. What type of man would ruin someone's life over a speech? I got up and walked to the window. The kind of individual who sees challenges to his professional reputation as problems that need to be solved. She was shaking and absolutely broken. She said, I have nothing left. No money, no family help, and no job. I work in a call center for $14 an hour and live in a studio apartment. I answered, I know. I have a Google alert set up for your name. Every time you write a new LinkedIn article about resilience and starting afresh, I get an email. Her face turned white. You are still keeping an eye on me? I'm making sure you don't do anything that would require more reporting to the government. She looked at me like I was speaking a language she didn't understand. Andrea, you made me look bad in front of my business partners and professional relations. You made it clear how much you cared about our connection. I walked to the door. This isn't mean. These are the results. You started a war with the wrong person. I unlocked the door. Please don't get in touch with me again. Please don't say my name. Go on with your life and hope I never have to look into what you've been up to again. She walked to the door feeling defeated and devastated. I'm sorry, she murmured in a low voice, for everything I said at the party. I stared at her for a long time. I said, I see your apology, but it doesn't matter. I shut the door and watched her walk to her beat-up car on the security camera. She cried for a few minutes while sitting in the driver's seat before finally driving away. I got another drink and went back to my talk. I had a business to look into by morning, and Andrea had already taken up too much of my time. This new hype feature recently came out on YouTube. If you can't stop thinking about this article, hit the hype button. It informs YouTube, this video should get a lot of views.